Hello everybody, welcome. It's Juliet here. Today we're not going to learn a project per se, but we're going to talk about a technique. So many of you have watched the previous video I made on this, which is how to do brick stitch. So normally when you do brick stitch, it offsets the beads in a zigzag pattern, okay? Because the whole idea of brick stitch is that you are stitching into the threads between the beads here. So I'm coming out right here. I would add a bead, I would stitch under this thread, go up, add another bead, stitch under the next thread. So it offsets all the beads between the previous row. So this pink bead is above the white and the pink, and the next bead would be above the pink and the white. So and people had asked, can you do it so that it's straight? And I said, yes, totally. So I have a video on that. Anyway, since that video, I kind of thought about it some more. And by making one simple change, it actually makes it smoother, okay? So you can see here the pink and white bit is the original bit that we did. And you see how every row bumps because we were going like forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, okay? And what that did, if you imagine these two beads are here, and we're going under the thread here, our thread is going to be running along kind of slightly to the front here, and then we were going back, and then we were coming out front. So we had like a little ridge of thread that was off center from the bead. So one row would tilt forward, and then you'd flip it around. You'd do the same thing on the other side, and the next row would tilt the other way. And it gave a slight kind of bumpiness to it. These are size 10 delicas, by the way, so if you were using size 11, you may not notice as much, but anyway, I'm just using these because it's easier to show. But you can see that it does give more of a bump. And then I thought, well, that's silly. So when you're coming out, what if you came out, went across this way, and then all of the beads would have the thread that's sitting under them diagonal. That way it's not being pushed to the front or the back, okay? So new concept here, okay? So also I had questions about how you start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the starting row, and then I'm going to show you the new method, new improved method, okay? All right, so the best way to do this is to start with a ladder stitch, and you can either do it 2 beads tall or 1 bead tall, okay? So I'm gonna start with 1 bead tall, and I'm going to pick up different color for each row. Okay, so yellow is my first row, green my second. So just go up through the yellow and pull them so that what you want is for them to sit beside each other like this, okay? And then you're going to go down the green. And then we're going to add a blue. So coming out the bottom, just going in the top. So if you use 2 yellows and 2 greens, your rows would already start being too tall, which is fine because it's ladder, it's you know, that it's an inline stitch, so having 2 rows out of the way is actually kind of easier than doing 1. But I'm just going to show you one just so you can see, and then I'm going to pick up a purple. If I can pick one up. Okay, so I'm coming out the top, going in the bottom here, and we'll do one more. We'll do a pink, okay? Now, obviously, you can make this row as long as you need it to be. Okay. And this is where everyone got confused. They were like, what do I do now? Okay, so go out the end. And if you are using an even number of beads, your thread will just be up here instead of down there, but that's absolutely fine. You can weave that in right at the end, okay? So it doesn't matter if your thread happens to be coming out the top here, okay? You just want your working thread to be coming out the top. Okay, so I'm going to flip over so that I'm working left to right, which is more natural for me. Okay, so our first two beads here are pink and purple. So I'm going to pick up a pink and a purple. So you want to pick them up in the order that they go from the end, okay? You're going to stitch under the thread between the pink and the purple right here, okay? And try and keep my tail out of the way here. They're kind of going to stack, but they're going to be a little bit off to the side, okay? Then what you're going to do here is you're then going to, hang on, let me tighten this up a little bit. Okay. You're going to pull your thread across towards the back, because I sewed back to front, and then I'm also going to sew back to front through the thread between the purple and the blue. Okay. And this first row, because this is tiny, it's kind of hard for me to hold on to it, and then you're going to sew back up into the purple bead. And that is going to pull them in line like this. So this end bead might kick out. It's not really attached properly. It's just grabbing onto this purple bead right here, okay? So our next bead here is a blue bead. So I'm going to pick up the blue bead, and here's where you'll actually see the technique a little bit better, hopefully. You stitch under the thread next to the purple bead, so I'm going towards myself, okay? Move the thread to the back underneath that bead that you just added on, and then stitch again forward from the back to the front through that blue and green gap right there, okay? Then you sew up through the blue bead and pull. Then we're going to add a green, okay, so here's our green bead. We're going to stitch under the thread between the blue and the green. I'm stitching towards myself. You can either stitch away the whole time or towards yourself, but I just find it easier for this to stitch towards myself, then pull this to the back, and then stitch towards myself again through the thread between the green and the yellow or orange or whatever color that is. Sun glow. All right, and then lastly, you have to remember to sew back up through the green bead. And then we have the sun glow. So you pick up your bead, you're going to stitch under the only thread that is there at the end, okay? So there's no extra thread at the end here, okay? And sew up through that sun glow. Now, on the very first little row here, sorry, pulled my tail in there, I would suggest that it's a good idea to do a square stitch here and sew down through the two at the end of the row and up through the two at the end of the row, just to kind of lock them together a little bit better. And this is why you might want to start the whole thing with two tall piece. But anyway, on this stitch, the end one is always going to be loose, and it's up to you whether every row you want to circle and do a square stitch, or you want to wait till the end and then sew all the way down just to lock them all together. All right, so I've turned around. I have a yellow and a green bead, so I'll pick that up. So you stitch through that thread between the yellow and the green bead, okay? Pull it to the back, stitch between the green and the blue, and you stitch back up through the green bead. Now you can see that this yellow bead is not attached to anything. That's why I'm saying either at the end or like every other row, you're going to want to sew down to attach them on to each other. But you don't need to do it here. You can go to the end of the row, attach, and then when you come back, you can attach. So it's kind of up to you when you want to do that. All right, pick up a blue. You're going between the green and the blue. So you're just going on the left side, pull to the back, and then on the right side of whatever bead you're stitching on top of. And then up through that bead. Okay. It is hard at the beginning just because it's hard to hold on to it. But the technique is exactly the same on the second row as it is on every row after. Okay. There's nothing different about it. And here is the last pink. So you just go in the only spot there is, and then you can go up through here. Okay, and then again, if you want to link those rows together, you can actually go down all three if you need to, because I don't think I have linked any of these together yet. Okay, now as it works, and the longer the row is, the more straight it'll be, but anyway, it is definitely a lot flatter using this technique. You don't get the kind of wavy up and downness that you do with the older method that I showed you. Okay, so just remember, at the beginning, you're picking up 2, you're going down through the very first gap between the 2, pull the thread back, and then go through the next gap, and then up the second bead. And just keep working along like that, okay? So hopefully that now makes sense to you, and hopefully this new and improved method will work a little bit better for you. I would recommend, like, this is I think this is a size 8 fire line that I'm using, and the bigger the thread is, the more gap you're going to have between your beads, because remember, there is a thread that runs through there, and these are size 10. So with the size 11 beads, it's going to be you're going to want to use a thinner thread, or like a nylon thread that's a little bit thinner, and I would use a thread that's going to blend in well with your project as well. Okay, so yeah, here I would just turn around, I would just pick up my yellow green, sew through here, pull to the back, sew through here, and sew up the green. Okay, and you just keep going like that. So I hope that helps. Sorry, this is a little bit wonky because it's so small, but you get the idea. But I would really recommend starting with a ladder that's too high if you can, just because I do think it's a little bit easier to hold on to and kind of get going with that. Okay, all right, take care, see you in the next video. Bye.